Hey, good evening, and welcome to the new show. I'm your host, Random Rob. It's New Year's Eve tonight in North America. To everybody celebrating, please be safe while you're having fun tonight. I'm not going to get into crash statistics, but you know the deal. Be safe out there tonight, and look after your friends, too. Now, for tonight's episode, I had originally intended to talk about several books that I've always wondered why they haven't been made into films yet. But it's New Year's Eve, and while I was nosing around on Twitter this week, I noticed that a lot of people are putting up their 10 best films of the past decade up. So what I'm going to do tonight is talk about one of the books, and then segue into my top 10 films from 2009 to 2019. So to kick this off, this is a segment I will call Why the Hell Isn't It a Movie? A Plague of Demons from 1965, written by Keith Laumer. Do you like 80s and 90s sci-fi action films like Total Recall or The Matrix? Well, if you do, you should give A Plague of Demons a read. A Plague of Demons is a spy story. It's an augmented bionic man story. It's an alien invasion story. And ultimately, it's an intergalactic war story. And I'll talk a little bit of the plot just to sort of tease it for you, because I don't want to give away the whole book. A Plague of Demons follows secret agent John Bravas. As the story opens, Bravas is summoned to the fictional North African country of Tambula by fellow agent Felix Severance. As it turns out, Severance's invitation has nothing to do with official counterintelligence, but actually involves something much more sinister. Severance explains to Bravas that battlefield statistics are not adding up. Not enough soldiers are being buried. Now, at the time the book is supposed to take place, military actions are being fought essentially as war games in neutral locations. Severance gives him a kit of high-tech tools. These include an optical camouflage suit and a flying belt, and UN credentials to observe the war games. During the battle, Bravas witnesses a tank go AWOL and follows it into a canyon. The men exit the tank and are suddenly stunned by some unseen force and keel over. It's at this point that an alien vehicle appears, and creatures get out of the ship, who run about on all fours like dogs, but have humanoid skull faces. Bravas, from a distance, watches as one of the creatures removes the brain of one of the incapacitated humans. He collects some of the evidence and heads back to the military command to inform General Julius, who is in charge of the war game, to show him what he's found. Julius then, exhibiting superhuman strength, tries to kill Bravas. From this point on, the narrative becomes a cross-country chase, with Bravas trying to avoid the alien dog creatures and their human-seeming counterparts, and trying to get back in touch with his friend Felix, who he begins to realize knows more about what's going on than he's letting on. And I'll leave it right there, because the rest of the details of the story are so much fun I don't want to spoil it for you. But what blows my mind is, and if you read the book you'll agree, it is such a great action story. The alien enemy in it is terrifying, and you don't really find out what exactly is going on until the last few chapters of the book, where the story takes a detour that would have been impossible to have done on film until now. All of the creatures and effects for this movie could easily be done by the bigger studios, and it would be a killer science fiction action film. And for those of you who are fans of movies like National Treasure with Nicolas Cage, there's a wonderful conspiracy in this story that goes back to the Founding Fathers, and it turns up in a surprise ending to an act that in the book that is just a nail-biter. And also, just speaking in terms of science fiction literature, it has a really nice sort of hard-boiled Raymond Chandler-esque writing style. It's highly enjoyable reading. Look it up, A Plague of Demons. You read it and tell me, why isn't it a movie? Alright, moving along. As a special for New Year's Eve, my top 10 films from 2009 to 2019. And I should clarify from the beginning, I don't always see a lot of new movies. When I go to the cinema, it's usually to see highly anticipated science fiction movies. Not necessarily the big budget ones, but the ones that look like they're trying to do something different. So on this top 10, it's about a 50-50 split between dramas and sci-fi. You know how my tastes run. So, starting with number 10. Dredd. There's a lot of things I could say about Dredd. I could talk about how it's a really good genre picture. I could talk about how it's a really good example of like a sci-fi western almost. Even though it's a futuristic cops and robbers story, you know, it has an old Clint Eastwood movie vibe to it. And really cleverly done on a small budget. I could go on at length about all of that, but all I really want to say about Dredd is that every time Karl Urban sets his jaw and scowls, I cheer. Number 9, Snowpiercer. This is a film I'm often surprised not more people have seen at this point. It has a very powerful message about class warfare in it. It's beautifully filmed, and if you've never seen anything by Bong Joon-ho, it's a great place to start. But what I love about his movies is the fact that he's one of a handful of directors alive right now who is pretty much making exactly the movies he wants to make. All of his films just have a freedom of creativity to them that's like a breath of fresh air. Number 8, Moon by Duncan Jones. This is a film I always meant to cover on Media Bites, but never did. I don't know why. It is one of the best examples of a modern director synthesizing the visuals and themes of early 70s sci-fi. It's easily one of Sam Rockwell's best performances. I like him so much in Moon. You know, Sam Rockwell is often typecast as assholes. In most of his movies, he always plays kind of snarky characters, but Moon is like a really well-rounded, full performance, and the whole film is just this beautiful, sad meditation on a man who's estranged from his family looking at his life and trying to find the value of it. And it's a legit tearjerker at times. Just a real work of love, a beautiful movie. If you like science fiction at all and haven't seen Moon, you really need to take care of that. Number 7, Annihilation. Now this is a film I did cover for Media Bites. This was actually a toss-up because I couldn't quite decide whether I wanted to include Ex Machina or Annihilation, but on reflection, I think both films are brilliant, but Annihilation to me is the one that's a little more deep, a little more rewatchable, a little more fascinating in what it was trying to pull off. It's one of the few films I've seen in the past 10 years that really gave me hope that serious science fiction films are still alive. Number 6, Take Shelter, starring Michael Shannon. Take Shelter is an emotional, intimate feeling character study about a construction worker who begins to have visions of a coming storm and questioning himself as to whether these visions are real, are they hallucinations, is he going mad? And it's one of the only films I've ever seen that really digs into what I would call the primal male fear. And that is, as a man, that you may not be able to protect your home and your family from some unforeseen disaster. The entire film, in a way, is a metaphor for that, and its climactic scene is such a great example of reaching out to someone who has been completely paralyzed by their own fears. It's such a strong scene. I can't think of any film about addressing fear that was more clear in its message and sensitive in its approach. Number 5, Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas is, again, a movie I talked about on Media Bites. I never finished. I had meant it to be a 2-part video, but never finished it. And basically because I wanted to trace how the spiritual evolution of all the characters in the film through the different reincarnations all, created this wheel. And just realized it would take too long to do, and it would take too long to do in this video as well. But I do want to point out that is one of the most fascinating things about the film, especially when you rewatch it, is noticing all the various incarnations of the characters throughout the timelines at these different points in their spiritual evolution. And it's also an example of a film where I think the movie almost stated what the book was trying to say in a more eloquent way. And I really can't think of any other film based on a book where the movie said it better. But that's where I'm at with that. Number 4, Mother, also by Bong Joon-ho. Mother is definitely a divisive kind of film. It's not for everybody. It deals with very dark subject matter, but the character of the mother in the film is one of the most cinematically indelible character performances in a movie you will ever see. You don't forget it afterwards. It bothers you, and it makes you want to watch it again, and really points out in ways that few films dare to try that life and morality is messy. Number 3, God Bless America, written and directed by Bobcat Goldthwait, with an unforgettable performance by Joel Murray. Probably the only film seen in theaters to address the subject of mean-spiritedness in American society and in media. It has an opening scene that will put off probably 90% of the people who sit down to watch it, thinking it's sort of a lighthearted comedy. It is a lighthearted comedy, but it has no bones about trashing stereotypes. So not for everyone. But if, like me, you feel sometimes that the toxic and corrosive effects of partisan media are kind of tearing the country apart, God Bless America might be the only film I've seen in a long time that's willing to take a stand for basic politeness in a comedy about an older man and a younger woman who go on a killing spree. Number 2, Florida Project. Simply one of the most heartbreaking films I've ever seen, heartbreakingly real. The performances in Florida Project do not feel like performances, they feel like actual life, actual situations. It's a difficult film to watch, yet you can't take your eyes off it, because the world that the little girl in this story lives in is the world we live in. If you can watch Florida Project without coming away with a better understanding of how America seems to kids right now, you might not have a pulse. And number 1, my favorite film of the past 10 years, First Reformed by Paul Schrader. I just rewatched it again yesterday. Ethan Hawke's performance is astounding. I feel sometimes there are people who missed this film because the religious themes in it might have been off-putting to them. If that's the case, they're not off-putting. You should give it a look. First Reformed is another film that has something very important to say. It has a big, damn important question in it to Christians and to everyone, really, about saving the planet. And it is a beautiful, elegantly done film, a significant film. And if things don't change, it's going to be a film that's going to be very hard to watch in decades to come. So that's it. Thanks for joining me tonight. I want to wish you all a happy new year. And as you celebrate and reflect on this past year, I hope it was a year where you were able to make a difference to others. And wish the same for the coming year, because there's a lot going wrong in the world right now. There's a need more than ever before for people to just listen to each other and have empathy for people who are different. And try to remember that no matter how much vitriol and anger you see online or you're seeing in the world right now, remember that it's coming from fear. People are scared. They want to know that things are going to be all right. And we need to start telling each other that things are going to be all right as long as we can work together. whether it's in the federal government or it's in our neighborhoods. We have got to start having more empathy for each other and start getting away from the dialogue that pushes people apart, from the rhetoric that's pushing us apart. And maybe it's something as simple as putting this thing on mute for a little bit and listening to this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.